Welcome to our channel. Before we get started, please consider liking and subscribing so we can bring more stories like this to you.
Ghost of the Azure Seas. The gangway resonated beneath Cutter's weight as he boarded the Neptune's Jewel. Reflected sunlight from the polished brass and alabaster railings was a momentary solar flare. Forcing him to squint, he tugged the faded baseball cap lower, a reflex to become invisible among the boarding revelers. The air vibrated with the jubilant sounds of holiday. The shrieks of children, robust laughter from families, and the gentle murmurings of elderly couples. He navigated the throng with the ease of a shadow, a phantom among the living. The ship's lavishness bordered on the offensive. Glistening marble stretched beneath colossal crystal fixtures, scattering light in a dazzling display. Attentive stewards proffered champagne flutes on silver platters. It was a far cry from the grime he knew so well, a realm built on artifice and indulgence. A knot of apprehension tightened in Cutter's stomach. He'd learned not to trust appearances. His cabin proved surprisingly roomy, though minimally appointed. A lone porthole framed the churning wake. He tossed his duffel onto the cot and raked a hand across his close-cropped hair. Sleep had been elusive for days. The visions persisted. Flashback. A child's petrified gaze, too knowing for her age, mirrored the wavering light of a kerosene lamp. A cloying stench of stale sweat and raw dread filled the space. The coppery taste of blood lingered in his memory. Alongside the sickening snap of bone, he hadn't been fast enough. He had hesitated. Cutter shook off the memory, locking it away once more. Brooding wouldn't change the present. He had a mission. He unzipped the duffel. Extracting a subtle camera disguised as a writing instrument, he slid it into his pocket. The familiar weight a meager reassurance. He emerged on deck. The crowd had dispersed, most having sought refuge in their staterooms to settle in. Leaning against the rail, feigning interest in the panorama, he discreetly observed those nearby. He sought a discordant note, a sign of something amiss. A trio of men drew his attention, positioned near the casino entrance. Their somber attire clashed with the colorful holiday garb of the other passengers. They were powerfully built, their faces grim and unyielding. One bore a prominent scar slashing from temple to jaw. They looked more fitting for a dimly lit alley than this luxury liner. Yet, their appearance wasn't the sole source of Cutter's unease. It was the young woman in their company. Delicate, with flowing dark hair and startled, luminous eyes, she appeared scarcely past adolescence. Her dress, a shimmering azure creation, looked ill-fitting, perhaps borrowed. She kept her gaze lowered, avoiding contact. The men spoke to her in muted tones, their voices low and threatening. Cutter couldn't decipher the words, but the nonverbal language was unmistakable. They were controlling her, cowing her. He noted as they steered her down an interior corridor, their grasp firm on her arms. A slow burn of anger began to smolder. Beneath Cutter's composure, he recognized that expression, that demeanor of enforced compliance. He'd witnessed it too often. He told himself to disengage. It wasn't his concern. He was here to disappear, to locate some measure of solace. But the girl's face, the silent appeal in her eyes, was a stark reminder of his past failures. He straightened, resolve hardening his features. He followed, maintaining a discreet distance. His senses heightened. The cheerful music from a nearby lounge suddenly sounded. Shrill, a jarring contrast to the ominous undercurrent he sensed beneath the vessel's shining veneer. He had to determine their destination, their objective, and should his suspicions prove correct, he knew retreat would be impossible. The specters of his past, the faces of those he'd failed to protect, wouldn't allow it. The sapphire expanse stretched before him, lovely and treacherous, concealing secrets beneath its radiant skin. Cutter knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was about to descend into those hidden depths. Whispers in the wind, the salty tang of the sea and the vessel's deep, resonant hum provided constant company as Cutter navigated the sun-deck crowd. A phantom unnoticed. He wasn't seeking leisure. He was angling for secrets, the kind that clung to the dim corners, nearly lost amid the merriment and the symphony of tinkling glass, yet redolent of decay. He leaned against the railing, simulating fascination with the endless horizon while his senses sharpened. A cluster of men, faces florid with drink and voices amplified beyond measure, drew his attention. Their banter was a crude tapestry of boasts and jests, but a phrase, uttered with careless ease, snagged his attention. Fresh product, arriving Malta. Product. The word lingered, pregnant with sinister meaning. Moving on, Cutter traced the perimeter of the pool deck. The air here was saturated with chlorine and the saccharine aroma of sunscreen. The different kind of unease pulsed here, masked by manufactured smiles and shimmering swimwear near the bar. He marked a young woman, barely past adolescence, her eyes flickering nervously across the scene her companion. A man who could have been her grandfather held her arm with possessive force. Cutter catalogued the detail later. Feigning trouble with the ship's Wi-Fi, Cutter extracted information from a junior officer over an hour that he learned the ship's roster was meticulously kept, digitally and on paper, accessible only to a select few in command. Security procedures were rigorous, in theory. Cameras guarded every common area and most passageways. But Cutter knew safeguards were only as reliable as those who upheld them. That evening, he haunted the casino, a vortex of swirling haze and desperate hope that he sipped a solitary glass of water. His gaze sweeping the room, he wasn't seeking victors, he was seeking predators. He recognized one from the sun deck, the speaker of product. He was now engrossed in conversation with a hulking man with a shaved head and a gaudy gold chain. Their heads were close, their voices hushed, almost clandestine. Cutter strained. But the clamor of the casino swallowed their words whole. He redirected his focus to the young woman from the pool deck. She sat alone at a roulette table, fidgeting anxiously with a meager stack of chips. Her escort was conspicuously absent. Cutter observed as she lost round after round, her shoulders drooping with each revolution of the wheel. Finally, she pushed her last chip forward, shut her eyes tight, and waited. When the wheel stilled, she didn't even glance. She simply arose and walked away. Her face drained of color. Cutter shadowed her at a safe distance. He watched her proceed toward one of the less frequented decks, the one reserved for the crew. He was about to turn back when he overheard it. A sharp, bitter exchange. "I told you, I don't want to." The young woman's voice, taut with desperation. "Don't be foolish, girl. You know what you owe." The man's voice, gravelly and threatening. I just can't." A sob punctuated her words. Cutter's fist clenched. He yearned to intervene, to tear the man away and demand answers. But he resisted. He needed more than suspicion. He needed verifiable facts. He melted back into the shadows, the woman's pained cries echoing in his ears. Back in his cabin, Cutter replayed the fragments he had collected. The product reference, the jittery young woman, the angry confrontation. Separately, they were disconnected details. But united, they painted a grim portrait, a vile scheme of exploitation. He felt a familiar iciness grip his stomach. Human trafficking on this opulent floating resort, a clandestine market in despair, thrived. He understood he could not turn a blind eye. His past refused to allow it. The ship's roster, that was his next objective. He needed to devise a method to access it, to uncover who was being ferried, and to what destination. The whispers on the breeze had transformed into a scream within his soul. He was ensnared, far more deeply than he desired. The girl from Amalfi. He located her on the sundeck, secluded behind a fat hibiscus bush, her gaze lost in the vessel's frothing wake. For 2 days, he'd observed her. Ever since that haunted quality had snagged his attention, clinging to her like the tang of brine. Her movements held a silent urgency, a sharp contrast to the ship's prevailing air of carefree abandon. He approached with measured steps, wary of startling her. "The sunset puts on a decent show from here," he remarked, his tone even. She started, then pivoted, her eyes flitting around as though seeking an exit. I didn't notice you." Her English possessed a delicate hesitancy, imbued with a musical Italian cadence. "John," he offered, extending a hand. "John Cutter." She regarded his hand cautiously, then briefly met it with hers. "Isabella." Her hand, though small, possessed a surprisingly firm grip. She retracted it almost immediately. Silence descended, broken only by the deep hum of the engines and the distant sounds of other passengers enjoying the cruise. Cutter leaned against the railing, granting her space. He wouldn't pressure her. "Amalfi?" he ventured, spotting the dainty silver charm swinging from her wrist. A perfect replica of the town's Duomo. A shadow, perhaps sorrow, flickered across her features. "See? Amalfi." He waited, patient. The sinking sun daubed the horizon with furious strokes of orange and violet, mirrored in the ocean's vast expanse. "T last." She spoke, her voice a bare thread of sound. They promised employment modeling in America a grand opportunity, they said. Cutter remained still, allowing her to proceed at her rhythm. They were persuasive, displayed glossy photographs, opulent hotels that I needed the funds. For my family, she trailed off, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. And then? He coaxed gently. A shudder rippled through her. Then I boarded the ship. My passport confiscated for safekeeping, they claimed, and the work. Not modeling it was. The words caught in her throat. Cutter's jaw tightened. He'd anticipated it, but confirmation ignited a frigid anger within him. You're not alone in this, are you? She shook her head, tears now tracing paths down her cheeks. No others are trapped. I caught a glimpse when they herded us on board. He needed information. The serpent's head. Who orchestrates this? Isabella. She hesitated, her gaze wide with dread. She glanced around, as if expecting eavesdroppers. Silas, she whispered, the name barely audible on the breeze. His name is Silas. Cutter filed the name away. Silas. A beginning. Can you tell me anything about him? His whereabouts? His associates? He's always surrounded by bodyguards, towering men. He occupies a suite on the upper decks that I saw him enter. She covered her mouth with her hand, as if preventing further revelations. Cutter nodded slowly. You've given me plenty. You're remarkably brave, Isabella. Brave? A mirthless sound escaped her. I'm petrified. You have every reason to be. But you spoke. That requires valor. He met her gaze directly, unflinchingly. I can offer assistance, Isabella. But I require your trust. She scrutinized him for what felt like an eternity, searching his eyes. He understood her quest. She sought honesty, a sliver of humanity beneath the weathered exterior. She discerned something within him, a glimmer of hope to grasp. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice still trembling slightly, yet imbued with a newfound conviction that a tentative alliance had been forged on the ship's sundeck. As it sliced through the ocean towards its destination, Cutter recognized the perilous nature of the game, and he resolved that neither she nor the others would become another victim of Silas's heinous operation. He would dismantle it, piece by painstaking piece, if that's what it demanded. Silas's web. Cutter felt the sticky film of sweat gather beneath his collar. He'd spent the better part of the day tucked away in the bowels of the ship, navigating the labyrinthine corridors reserved for the crew. The air hung thick with the smells of stale grease, disinfectant, and simmering resentment. He'd flashed a winning smile and a handful of crumpled bills, enough to loosen a few tongues amongst the overworked and underpaid engine room staff. His initial hunch had paid off. The lost luggage claims. Sudden spike that Isabella had flagged weren't lost at all. They were being quietly rerouted. Cutter had learned the locker assignments, the shifts of the baggage handlers involved, and the blind eyes that conveniently looked the other way. At a hefty bribe to a junior officer revealed that Silas Thorne had handpicked these men, dangling promises of early retirement and lavish bonuses. The corruption was systemic, spreading like a slow-acting poison through the ship's infrastructure. It was more than just a few bad apples. It was an orchard deliberately cultivated for rot. Cutter imagined Silas, a spider at the center of a glistening, deadly web. He traded the stifling engine room for the crisp, perfumed air of the casino. Tonight, Silas was hosting a high-stakes poker game in the opulent Emperor's suite. Cutter, dressed in a borrowed tuxedo that felt a size too small, leaned against a marble pillar, nursing a glass of water. He wasn't here to gamble, he was here to observe. The room reeked of expensive cigars and desperation. Around the mahogany table sat a collection of faces that could curdle milk. A Russian oligarch with eyes like glacial ice, a South American businessman whose fingers danced nervously over a pile of chips, a woman draped in diamonds whose smile never quite reached her eyes. Silas, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence, dealt the cards with a practiced flick of the wrist. Cutter watched him. He wasn't just playing poker. He was playing his guests. He flattered, teased, and subtly threatened, extracting information and favors with the same ease he extracted chips from their overflowing stacks. A quick aside to the Russian about securing a shipment. A murmured promise to the businessman about smoothing over some customs issues. It was all coded. But the meaning was chillingly clear. Later, as the game thinned and the air grew thick with tension, Cutter saw Silas slip a folded piece of paper to the woman in diamonds. She glanced at it, nodded almost imperceptibly, and tucked it into her purse. Cutter recognized the gesture that it was a confirmation. A signal that he managed to catch a glimpse of the paper as she briefly opened her purse. A series of numbers and letters, a date, and a single word, carousel. Back in his cabin, Cutter tapped carousel into his laptop. The name led him to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, a labyrinthine network of offshore accounts, and a series of encrypted messages that hinted at trafficking routes and distribution networks. He needed Isabella's help to decipher the full extent of it. But the picture was becoming agonizingly clear. Silas wasn't just moving stolen goods or laundering money. He was orchestrating a human trafficking operation, using the cruise ship as a floating hub, a luxurious facade masking unimaginable cruelty. And he was doing it with the complicity of his crew and the backing of powerful and scrupulous individuals. Cutter stared at the screen. The weight of it pressing down on him, he was a lone wolf in a gilded cage, facing an enemy who controlled the very walls around him. He had to find a way to expose Silas, to dismantle his web, before it was too late for those trapped within it. He just needed to figure out how. Shadows in the engine room. The engine room vibrated with a raw, mechanical life force. A cacophony of escaping steam, interlocking gears, and the deep-throated growl of the ship's colossal power plant permeated the vast chamber. Pressed against the cool metal of a turbine housing, Cutter felt a sheen of heat oil his skin. The air, thick with the acrid bite of ozone and the sharp scent of heated metal, prickled in his nostrils. Isabella's pilfered access codes had gotten him past 2 security points, each electronic chirp, seeming to amplify in the immense space. He sought the manifest logs, the physical records. Silas wouldn't trust such sensitive, incriminating data solely to digital formats. Isabella had mentioned their possible location near the auxiliary power generators, secured within a restricted archive accessible only to senior engineers. Each movement was precise, calculated. Cutter's gloved fingers traced a massive pipe. The resonating tremor traveling up his arm like an electric shock. He halted, straining to listen. Only the unyielding mechanical symphony of the vessel, the relentless pulse of its journey, filled the void. He discovered the archive concealed behind a tangled web of pipes and conduits. The steel door, reinforced and featuring a digital lock and a small viewing port, barred his entry. Inside, regimented rows of labeled binders stretched into the murky depths. He swiftly entered the code Isabella had provided. The lock disengaged with a soft thud. He slipped inside. The archives. Air was stagnant, almost sepulchral. Alone. Sputtering fluorescent lamp flickered overhead, casting elongated, spectral shadows that danced around him. Cutter moved with purpose, his gaze sweeping across the labels. His focus narrowed on the manifest ledgers from the past quarter. He selected one, opening it. The names were obfuscated, but he recognized the cipher Isabella had decrypted, a series of digits corresponding to various ports, each representing a specific passenger. He began comparing these coded names with the ship's roster, each confirmed match solidifying his grim suspicions. A sharp clang reverberated from beyond the archive. Cutter stilled. It lacked the intrinsic hum of the engine room. It resonated like metal striking metal. Someone kicking a pipe. Perhaps. He killed the flickering light, enveloping the archive in shadow. He flattened himself against the wall beside the door, his hand instinctively finding the cool grip of the silenced pistol nestled against his back. The door burst inward, bathing the room in the stark illumination of the engine room. 2 figures blocked the entrance. Silhouetted against the glare, he recognized them at once. Bronco, the towering brute with the close-cropped head, and Rico, the ferret-faced one with the nervous tick. Silas's muscle. Well, Bronco rasped, his voice like rocks tumbling down a hill. Looks like a little stowaway got lost. Surprise party? Cutter replied, his tone level, concealing the adrenaline coursing through him. Bronco charged, his massive fist aimed at Cutter's head. Cutter evaded the blow. Feeling the wind of it disturb his hair, he retaliated with a sharp kick to Bronco's kneecap, disrupting the giant's balance. Rico darted forward, a flash of steel appearing in his grasp, a flick knife. Cutter swerved, seizing Rico's wrist and twisting it violently. Rico cried out, releasing the blade. The fight was fierce, the close quarters exacerbating the difficulty. Cutter used the shelving for support, dodging and feinting, exploiting the confined space. Bronco, despite his bulk, moved with surprising speed. Rico, though smaller, was agile and spiteful. Cutter connected with Bronco's jaw, but the blow seemed to barely register. Rico slashed at Cutter's arm, the blade slicing through his shirt, leaving a fiery trail that he realized he couldn't prevail in this cramped arena. He needed leverage. He snatched a hefty binder from the shelf and hurled it at Bronco's skull. The impact resonated with a dull thwack. Bronco stumbled backward. Momentarily disoriented, Cutter capitalized on the opportunity, shoving Rico into Bronco, sending them both crashing to the floor. He seized the moment, slamming the door shut and engaging the bolt.it wouldn't hold them for long, but it would grant him precious seconds. He bolted back into the engine room. The mechanical roar, a deafening curtain that almost masked the sounds of Bronco and Rico hammering against the archive door. Retracing his steps through the checkpoints was no longer an option. He had to discover another route, a path that would lead him back to the passenger areas of the ship unseen. He knew Silas would be hunting him now. The rules redefined. The mission had shifted, from gathering intelligence to a struggle for survival. Island of Lost Souls. Isabella's gaze flitted across the clamorous galley while she attacked a grimy pan. Cutter watched, the metallic din of cookware a jarring counterpoint to his growing unease. Something had shifted within her, a spark of rebellion barely masked by fear. He drew nearer, his voice a hushed rumble. You said they were talking about relocating you. Where to? She hesitated, eyes glued to the roiling, sudsy water. An island, she breathed at last. A private island, that's what I overheard Silas tell the captain. The word echoed in Cutter's mind, pregnant with sinister implications. That a glacial dread seeped into his bones. An island spelled isolation. Absolute control. No witnesses. It meant their scheme was accelerating, poised to enter its final, chilling act. Did you catch anything else? Names? Coordinates? He urged, striving to keep the desperation from his tone. Isabella shook her head, a solitary tear carving a clean streak through the grime on her cheek. No, just island. He said it was ready, that everything was set. He gave her arm a reassuring squeeze. You're doing great, Isabella. That you're helping us expose this. He needed to move, and now that he had to transmit a warning, alert the authorities, or even the ship's security, though their loyalty felt increasingly dubious. Stay put, he directed. Keep a low profile. Don't invite attention. He straightened, affecting an air of casualness as he quit the galley. He required a secure channel, a haven from eavesdroppers, the captain's stateroom. A risky gamble, but one he had to take. He navigated the warren of passageways, senses heightened. He passed shipmates, their faces either blank masks or radiating open animosity. He reached the captain's cabin, rapped authoritatively, and waited. The door swung inward, revealing Captain Volkov, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with weary cynicism. Cutter, he acknowledged, his voice toneless. What is it you need? Captain, I need to report something. Of grave importance. Volkov arched a skeptical brow. Important enough to interrupt my leisure. Cutter entered, swiftly surveying the space. It was lavish, saturated with the scent of aged leather and stale cigarillos. It concerns Silas Thorne and the women he brought on board. Volkov's eyes narrowed, a fleeting, inscrutable expression flickering across them. Thorne is a highly regarded guest. Are you making accusations? He's trafficking women. Captain. I have evidence pointing to such. He intends to transport them to a secluded island. Volkov remained unmoved. Island? Which island? A prickle of alarm shot up Cutter's spine. The captain's lack of shock, his calculated response. It reeked of betrayal. I don't know the specific location, but I can procure proof. We must notify the proper channels. Volkov emitted a short, mirthless laugh. Channels? Mr. Cutter, your idealism is touching. Mr. Thorne is a man of considerable influence. Such men are not inconvenienced by bureaucratic meddling. A chilling truth slammed into Cutter. The captain wasn't simply apathetic. He was an accomplice, he was neck-deep in the operation. "You're aware of this, aren't you?" Cutter pressed, his voice turning hard. Volkov's smile broadened, revealing stained teeth. "Let's just say I comprehend the perks of discretion. Mr. Thorne is exceptionally generous to those who demonstrate cooperation." Cutter's fists clenched, that he was isolated, truly and utterly alone. "You're a disgrace to your uniform," he snarled. Volkov shrugged. "Perhaps, but I'm a disgrace with a remarkably secure retirement package. Now, I suggest you depart, and disregard anything you think you've gleaned, for your own continued health." As Cutter turned to go, his spirit flagging, Volkov halted him. "One further point, Cutter.Mr. Thorne would be exceptionally displeased to discover you've been asking questions, particularly about his arrangements." He paused, letting the unspoken threat linger. "I wouldn't want anything unfortunate to befall you. Or your newfound acquaintance in the galley." Cutter felt the blood drain from his face. They knew about Isabella. He had to shield her. He had to engineer an escape, a means of striking back, even if it meant confronting Thorne and his entire network alone. The island loomed, and with it, potential doom for Isabella, and quite possibly, himself. Time was running out, and quickly hunted. Silas Thorne's face contorted into a mask of controlled fury, the vein in his temple throbbing like a trapped bird. The report had been delivered with stammering apologies by a junior security officer, detailing a series of unsettling events. A breached server, tampered security feeds, and the unauthorized access of passenger manifests. But it was the name attached to the digital fingerprints that truly ignited his rage. "Cutter?" Silas hissed, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "John Cutter. Associated with Isabella Rossi." The connection, once formed, was a blinding, sickening revelation. Isabella, the complication he'd foolishly underestimated, and Cutter, a ghost from his past, resurfacing to haunt him. He slammed his fist on the polished mahogany desk, rattling the crystal decanter of brandy. "Find him," Silas snarled, his voice dangerously low. "Capture him. I want him alive, for now." The hunt began immediately. Thorne's men, a pack of hardened mercenaries disguised as crew members, fanned out across the ship. Their orders were explicit. Neutralize any resistance, but prioritize Cutter's capture. Silas wanted to understand the extent of the damage, to unravel the threads of Cutter's investigation before they choked his entire operation. Cutter, meanwhile, was already moving. The compromised security feed had been a calculated risk, designed to draw Silas out. He'd known it was only a matter of time before he became the hunted. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors with a practiced ease. His movements fluid and purposeful. He bypassed the main thoroughfares, sticking to the service passages and maintenance tunnels, the hidden arteries of the ship. He heard them coming before he saw them. The muffled thump of boots against the metal floor, the hurried whispers carried on the ventilation shafts. 3 of them. Judging by the sound, big men, likely armed. Cutter pressed himself against the cold steel wall, the metallic tang of the engine room clinging to the air. He peered around the corner, confirming his suspicions. The mercenaries, faces grim and eyes scanning, moved in a tight formation, their hands hovering near the weapons concealed beneath their uniforms. He couldn't afford a direct confrontation. Not yet. He needed information, and a prolonged fight would only draw more attention. Cutter slipped back into the engine room. The roar of the massive turbines, a deafening cacophony. He moved through the maze of pipes and machinery, his senses heightened, every clang and hiss a potential threat. He found a maintenance hatch leading to a narrow crawl space beneath the engine room floor. It was a tight squeeze, the air thick with dust and the smell of oil, but it offered a temporary escape. He pulled the hatch shut behind him, the clang echoing in the confined space. The mercenaries burst into the engine room, their voices sharp and amplified by the metal walls. "He's in here. Seal the exits." Cutter crawled through the narrow space, the rough metal scraping against his skin. He could hear them above him, their heavy footsteps pounding on the metal floor, the frustrated curses echoing through the vents. He knew they wouldn't give up easily. Silas Thorne was not a man accustomed to failure. He reached the end of the crawl space and found another hatch, this one leading into a laundry room. The rhythmic thump of industrial washing machines and the scent of detergent filled the air. He cautiously opened the hatch, peering out into the room that it was empty. Save for a lone worker folding towels, Cutter emerged. His clothes covered in dust and grime, he held up a hand to the worker, silencing him with a stern look. "I need your clothes," he said, his voice low and urgent. "And I need to know the quickest way to the bridge." The worker, wide-eyed and clearly terrified, stammered, The bridge. You can't. It's restricted." "Not for me," Cutter said, his eyes narrowing. Now the clothes and the route, quickly. The chase was on, and Cutter knew that every second counted. He was a hunted animal in a gilded cage, and his survival and Isabella's depended on his ability to outwit a ruthless enemy. The ship, once a symbol of luxury and escape, had become a deadly battleground. Ballroom blitz. The chandelier, a celestial spider of crystal, scattered light across the ballroom's vast expanse. He petrified would poker table sat Silas Thorne. His bespoke suit groaning under the pressure of his bulk. A coterie of bootlickers and bruisers circled him, their expressions etched with avarice as they puffed on thick cigars and swirled amber liquor. Phony laughter bounced off the gilded walls, a grotesque parody of merriment. Cutter observed from the concealment of an enormous floral display. Its lilies failing to mask the sharp tang of corruption, he tracked the trail of Isabella Rossi's desperate hints, a digital Ariadne's thread leading him to this garish temple of wealth and sin. The muted clatter of chips, the whisper of cards, each sound rasped against his nerves. Delay was no longer an option. Stepping from the shadows, the crisp report of his boots on polished marble hushed the room like a snapped twig head swiveled, some showing curiosity, others instant antagonism. A glint of recognition sparked in Silas's eyes. "Well now," Silas rumbled, his voice a gravelly drawl, "if it isn't our little wanderer. Decided to try your luck, have you, Mr. Cutter?" "Luck has nothing to do with it, Silas," Cutter countered, his tone even and devoid of fear. "I'm here to collect, not debts, but truths." A ripple of unease spread through the room. Silas's jowls tightened. "Truth?" Audacious words from a trespasser. Who would credit the rantings of a common criminal over a man of my standing? Cutter remained unmoved. This confrontation was anticipated. Because truth is a corrosive acid, Silas. It eats away at the guilty until they're hollow. And you, my friend, are nearing collapse. He swept his gaze across the room, meeting the bewildered stares of onlookers who had paused to witness the unfolding spectacle. This opulent charade? It's built upon the backs of the broken. Silas Thorne isn't a mere gambler. He's a flesh peddler. He traffics in human lives, selling them as commodities. The room buzzed with murmurs of disbelief and shocked gasps. Silas slammed his fist on the table, sending a cascade of chips flying. "Get him!" he bellowed, his features twisted into a mask of fury. The thugs surged forward, their intentions unambiguous. Cutter was primed. The first attacker swung wildly, aiming a clumsy punch. Cutter evaded it, his elbow snapping up in a precise strike against the man's temple. The man slumped to the floor. Another charged, brandishing a blade with a sharp kick. Cutter sent the weapon skittering across the marble. The ballroom devolved into chaos. Cutter moved with brutal grace. A dance of calculated violence. He exploited every advantage, using an ice bucket as a bludgeon, a chair as a springboard. Though outnumbered, he was far from defeated. Suddenly, reinforcements arrived. Two figures in ship's livery burst into the room, tackling two of Silas's goons. Cutter recognized them as members of the engine crew he'd spoken with earlier. They lacked finesse, but possessed brute strength and unwavering resolve. "We're with you, Cutter?" one shouted, connecting with a satisfying thud against a thug's jaw. More crewmen joined the fray, wielding improvised weapons, serving platters, fire extinguishers. Even a shattered champagne bottle. A chorus of defiance echoed through the ballroom, eclipsing Silas's sputtering rage. The passengers, initially paralyzed by fear, began to retreat, some offering hesitant support to the crew. Silas, sensing his grip on the situation disintegrating, seized a woman from the edge of the throng, using her as a shield. "Stay back!" he roared, his eyes frantic. "Or she gets it." Cutter's movements stilled, every muscle coiled. He couldn't jeopardize her. He noticed the growing number of crew, the nascent bravery shining in their eyes. Timing was crucial. "Release her, Silas." Cutter commanded, his voice a low threat. "This ends here." Silas sneered. "You think you've triumphed? This is merely a prelude that I have connections. Resources beyond your comprehension." "Perhaps," Cutter said, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "But in this place, at this moment, you're done." With surprising speed, he yanked a tablecloth from the nearest table. Sending silverware and crystal crashing to the floor, he threw the linen at Silas. Momentarily blinding him, Silas flailed. Cutter closed the gap. Dodging his clumsy grasp, he delivered a focused blow to Silas's sternum. Silas stumbled backward. His eyes wide with disbelief, he choked for breath. His complexion turning a sickening shade of violet that he collapsed. Defeated silence descended upon the ballroom, broken only by the heavy breaths of the combatants and the distant strains of music. Cutter surveyed the scene, his body aching, his spirit buoyant. The war was far from won, but he had landed a crippling strike. He had exposed Silas, inspired the crew, and ignited a flame of resistance on this prison ship. The road ahead was arduous, but he was one step closer to justice at redemption's horizon. A cloying miasma of stale sweat, fear, and flat champagne permeated the air. Silas Thorne lay supine amidst the fractured remnants of his dominion. A discarded puppet, strings severed his face, formerly a bastion of arrogant command, was a study in defeat, scored with the harsh knowledge of his carefully erected world's collapse, motionless. He remained as armed officers flooded the opulent ballroom, securing the lavish space. Cutter absorbed the scene, a cold satisfaction settling deep. Within Thorne's network, that insidious lattice of influence and exploitation, was undergoing systematic demolition. He watched officers lead away the compromised captain, his expression a maelstrom of bewildered rage, and several crew, hobbled by restraints. Their complaints were feeble, pathetic whimpers against the rising tide of delayed justice. His focus shifted to the officers guiding the rescued women. Their countenances, though bearing the marks of trauma, flickered with nascent hope. Medics provided solace and initial triage. Blankets were distributed, offering a screen from the prying eyes of the remaining passengers. A collective of stunned elites whose extravagant escape had been irrevocably defiled. Arrangements were swiftly made for their repatriation. A pledge of renewal after the nightmares they'd faced. A strange detachment overcame Cutter, as though observing a drama performed on a distant stage, so consumed by the chase, so driven by the need to expiate past failings. The actuality of triumph felt almost illusory. They had prevailed. Yet, victory tasted ashen, incomplete. The women's faces lingered in his mind's eye, a relentless reminder of the darkness nesting beneath a veneer of civilization. He drifted to the ballroom's edge, gazing out at the boundless ocean. Sunrise painted the heavens in vibrant strokes of coral and rose, a magnificent panorama of natural splendor that seemed to deride the ugliness he had just confronted. A hand alighted on his sleeve. "Agent." Davies stood beside him, her features inscrutable. "They're securing the lower decks," she reported, her tone subdued. Thorne's operation was far more extensive than initial estimates suggested. "We're unearthing more evidence." Cutter nodded mutely. He understood. The full scope of Thorne's degeneracy remained veiled, yet to be revealed. Davies hesitated, then cleared her throat. "There's something else," she added, passing him a small, heavily encrypted device. "A message arrived for you. It's coded." He accepted the device, his fingers betraying a slight tremor. He identified the encryption. A system he had conceived years prior, a system only one soul possessed the means to unlock. Activating the device, his pulse hammered in his ears. The screen resolved, displaying a solitary line. "The lighthouse is lit. Isabella, she lived." A surge of relief washed through him, so potent it nearly robbed him of his footing. He had refused to permit hope, hadn't dared to entertain the notion of her escape from Thorne's grasp. Yet, she was unharmed. He regarded the horizon, the rising sun casting a luminous sheen upon the water. The lighthouse served as metaphor. Of course, it signified her nascent recovery, her navigation back toward light after being lost within the shadows. It declared her liberation. His fingers danced across the keypad, crafting a response, navigating by its light. He remained ignorant of her whereabouts, the future shrouded, but she was alive, and that sufficed. For the moment, the device vibrated. A new transmission appeared. Come find me when the tempest has subsided, much awaits recounting. Cutter deactivated the device, a ghost of a smile gracing his lips. The storm was far from spent. Investigations, debriefings, the lingering specter of Thorne's transgressions loomed large. But for the first time in too long, he felt a pinprick of hope, a conviction that, just possibly, redemption lay within reach. Turning from the horizon, his expression hardened, the work continued. The storm's fury had peaked, but the aftermath demanded attention, and he would oversee it. A lighthouse beckoned. Future awaited construction, and a vow obligated him. The ocean breeze bore the tang of salt and the promise of freedom, a foretaste of the coming dawn that was breaking along the skyline.